Imagine a world where more women had the time to fully explore their genius. Welcome to She Rebel Radio, a community-driven podcast dedicated to supporting women leaders to unlearn conventional rules and create their businesses of significance. This is our International Women's Day Inspire series with our headline partners, NatWest. NatWest has been a pioneer in supporting women in business since 2019. We have 10 new guests sharing their stories with you to inspire, to educate, and to empower. As you navigate this series with us, I'd love for you to consider, what is inspiring you for 2024? How do you personally make it work as a woman in business? And what change would you make to your industry to inspire more inclusion of women? My name's Lulu Mins. I host retreats and create spaces for women leaders to explore their genius. And today, I'm going to create that same space right here for you on this podcast. Welcome to episode 131 of She Rebel Radio, Inspiring Your Ritual with Kim Jack Riley. Kim is the founder of Tea and Grazing, which is a travelling tea room offering unique and eclectic experiences for enjoying your tea. They provide specialised tea tastings and rituals for small social groups, including within the workplace and corporate environments. As a certified tea sommelier, Kim has over 25 years of executive leadership experience in tourism marketing and is a published travel writer and editor. Born and raised in London, she began travelling abroad from a young age, beginning with her family trips to the Caribbean and later living in New York with her husband, who has his own special contribution to the specialist tea rituals they create together. Tea and Grazing really brings together Kim's love for art and culture, along with her own rich heritage, to create an experience to both savour and enjoy. This is way beyond the Victorian tea rooms of the past, so grab yourself a cuppa and join us for a tea ritual and conversation with Kim. Kim, it's amazing to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm lovely. Thanks so much, Lulu, for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you and all of your listeners. Ready to
Yes.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And I first saw you speaking at a NatWest event. I think it was saluting our sisters, and I thought that's a lady I would love to have on She Rebel Radio. So, and on top of that, it turns out we're neighbours. So you dropped me some
Yes.
tea at home. As it turns out, we live so close together. Tell me more about. I've got a cup of it in front of me. What you dropped off and the benefits of it and the tastes and all of that.
Well, yes, I'll jump right into it. And that's what I love about Brighton. It's such a colourful and eclectic place. So it's great being neighbours, and we know that we live in a really, really exciting city. So I dropped off to you a tea that's called Moringa. That's Moringa. And you're getting a bit of an accelerated experience, because usually when we do a tea tasting, I sort of warm people up to this tea, because it's not for your sort of average tea drinker. It's not an Earl Grey, it's not an English breakfast. But after you sort of learn a bit more about teas and all that they've got to offer, then I introduce the moringa, which is what I've given you. So it's a green variation of a green tea, and it's grown in a lot of tropical countries, but it's also known as sort of a miracle tea, because it just really covers all points when it comes to your health. And the quick version is that it's just like a miracle, that when you drink it, it goes into your bloodstream really smoothly. It doesn't have very much of a taste, so sometimes you might want to mix it with something, blend it with something, or add a sweetener if you need to. But what it does is actually knock out any bad bacteria or germs that you might have floating around. And at exactly the same time as it's knocking out the bad things, it's actually rebuilding from a cellular level all the good things and nutrients that you need to rebuild in your system.
Oh,
So by
amazing.
the time you've drunk a cup of that tea, you're actually ready to go. You've got a sort of a whole new person ready to walk around again.
Well, it's
So yeah.
perfectly timed, Kim, because I've been, recording She Rebel Radio with quite a cold and a very,
Ah,
chesty cough. So,
yes.
and it's got a very, I know what you mean in terms of the taste. It's quite an earthy taste, but I
Yes.
did get out some honey as well because I was like, if I need that, But I was going to say I'm not an average tea drinker, although I am an Earl Grey drinker. But I found it quite easy to dive into. But I do drink a lot of other herbal teas, although not as it does taste more sophisticated, whilst quite
Yes.
neutral than, I don't know, a cheap peppermint tea you might buy in the supermarket or something.
Right, and I think neutral's a really good word for it. So don't expect it's just very humble, really. It sort of just goes into your body, but it's your body that will actually speak back to you and say, I feel great.
Mm.
Thanks, for that tea. Probably important to note, since this is people are listening and not looking at you drinking it, but it also was a loose leaf, organic loose leaf tea. And that's another thing that I usually talk about as being really good idea if you can elevate yourself to loose leaf teas, and especially organic teas, versus the sort of, shop shelf tea bag.
Mm. Yeah, and I feel like what you said in terms of the benefits would be, as you know, I think you know anyway. I host retreats for women in business as well, and the level of depth of coaching that I do is a lot of the beliefs and going deep with where some of that comes from, which is we are changing on a cellular level when we're doing
Yes,
that depth of work. So it sounds like a really healing tea for that kind of thing as well, to kind of help that nurturing and healing process.
exactly. Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing. Now, your journey with tea started as a youngster in London. You worked in a tea shop and later, fast forwarding to training to become a tea sommelier. Now, what is a tea sommelier and how was that a life-changing training for you?
Well, that's a great question. So a tea sommelier is similar to a wine sommelier. And we learn from the very beginnings of how tea's grown, what conditions it needs to be to grown in to get a great crop, how it's harvested. So all of those prelude elements to the tea, and then we go on to learn um, for the table or for the restaurant, whatever, however you're serving it, what are the best teas to go with which foods. So pairing is a really important part of being a tea sommelier. So you sort of end up being able to give advice, and not everyone has to learn everything that there is to know about tea, just the same as you wouldn't know everything there is to know about wine. But it's always fun to go on a tasting and learn about new ones and see which ones you can incorporate into your lifestyle. So that's what a tea sommelier does. And it's actually becoming quite trendy now with really nice hotels you might go to for an afternoon tea. You'll actually find that there's a tea sommelier who's on the premises and comes out to your table. And again, just like a fine wine, they'll give you recommendations. So it's pretty cool these days to be a
Yeah.
tea sommelier.
Yeah, amazing. And how was that really life-changing for you and building on, working in a tea shop as a youngster?
Well, it's an interesting story I usually tell. I did end up having grown up in London. I did end up living in America, and my story with that is that whilst I was living in America, just about every day someone would say to me, "Oh, you're from England. You must know everything there is to know about tea." And I would sort of just inside, I would just shrivel because I didn't know everything that there was just because I'm from England. It's yes, we drink a lot of tea, but we don't actually investigate the whole history of tea. So that was a real driving point for me. I wanted to discover, I wanted to know what I didn't know. It became a challenge, if you will.
Mm,
And so I took the challenge. And what I would say about why it changed my life is because after I became certified, and then I would still receive the same questions, which was, you must know everything about tea. then was more confident because I could say, well, actually, yes, I do. And what
Hmm.
would you like to know about it? Because I do. It was a circular effect because I became confident. I really became empowered by having this sort of credential.
Mm.
And with that empowerment, I think that any woman particularly would understand that, when you feel empowered, the sky's the limit. But that's a very difficult place to get to sometimes, to be empowered. There's all
Mm.
sorts of challenges along the way. So yeah, that's why I would say it was life-changing.
Yeah.
It took me to a new realm of confidence that was able to transfer to many other areas in my life, really.
Yeah, and it's important to follow, isn't it? Those nudges and those things that we do feel inspired by to go and learn more about them and just see where that takes us.
Yes, exactly. That I would highly recommend. If you even get just a little twinkle, or sometimes it might come to someone in a dream, but whatever it is, if you are somewhere and something strikes you, take take that seriously. Don't just let it be a passing thought, because it actually might be, something of value towards your life.
And then it's when we look back, I feel like we then see the threads of it that's been
Yes,
everywhere.
exactly.
Yeah, which including for you, part of your dad was from Trinidad and Tobago, and growing up, he used to take you to see the family in the Caribbean. How did
Yeah.
that begin to shape your experience of tea and grazing as a social connection piece? What did you learn?
Well, it's interesting, Lulu, because as we're actually speaking today, this happens to be the time of year that Carnival is celebrated in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's a really big time of the year.
Oh,
And there are
amazing.
carnivals around the world, but most people will acknowledge that between Brazil and Trinidad and Tobago's carnival, those are the two big and best in the world. So it's lovely that we're talking about Trinidad at this time.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, my dad was from Trinidad, and he was fiercely sort of in charge of carrying on the culture and the heritage of Trinidad and Tobago. So when I would visit, one big difference that I learned immediately by visiting, I'm sure many people can relate to this in their cultures, is that when you would go to someone's home, it it can be very rude to decline an invitation for whether it's food or drinks. So
hmm
even if the food or drinks is something that you're not familiar with, you still would accept it graciously. Otherwise, you're sort of insulting the host. So I learned that there. And one of the things that they will always offer you in Trinidad and Tobago will be tea. And that's on a little side story, is that sometimes tea can be a coolant. So even though that is a Caribbean hot climate, it actually can be cooling. Tea can cool down your system as well.
mm. My
Um,
nan always used to say that, and I never believed her.
yeah,
She'd be like, "Have a cup of tea; it will cool you down."
right. There's actually a science behind that. It,
Oh
it
wow.
can be true, with depending on the tea, of course.
Mm,
But anyway, I would get, offered tea over there, and I was getting exposed to different kinds of teas. And again, Trinidad and Tobago is just one of many cultures where tea is used as a medicine.
mm.
So basically, there's a tea for every single ailment that you might have. And I often joke as well that, in England we might say, oh, you've broken your leg. Oh, have a cup of tea,
Yeah.
or you've got a headache, have a cup of tea. I mean, we do carry that sort of subliminal suggestion that tea is a medicine and will cure everything. But again, in places like the Caribbean, it's very factual. There's a tea again that matches every single ailment.
Mm,
And so it's not just about one sort of tea. You actually get exposed to a lot of different types of teas. So yeah, that was the continuum, I think, of the little tea shop in North London that I used to help out after school.
Yeah, and it's so true because here, it's generally, it's whatever cup of tea. There's no matching that takes place
Right.
with the ailment or anything. It's the tea that person may usually drink, whether that's Earl Grey or Tetley's or Builder's tea, as we like to call it. Um,
Right.
and things over here. Is there any reason for just as a sidetrack for this time of year for Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago? Is that celebrating anything seasonal or?
Yes.